device manufacturers, and if you just want to look at what different manufacturers are looking at on wrist-based sensors, the picture is of the Samsung SimBand, which does a lot of great stuff, but the sensor is not necessarily in the watch, even though there are sensors on the back, but they're really built into the wristband, so a lot of real estate to be able to measure different things. But if we look at all of the wristband sensor devices that we're working with alone, and I'm sure there are others we don't know, obviously measuring activity, pulse is simple, sleep is common, sleep stage is not as common, but it's getting more common. But there are also ones that measure blood pressure continuously, cardiac output and stroke volume continuously, the EKG like in the AliveCore, not continuously, but you'd have to, every time you touch it, it can record an EKG. There are several watch type devices, wrist devices that measure stress by electrodermal activity and heart rate variability that still need to be validated, but a lot of exciting work in things like post-traumatic stress disorder. Several measure respiratory rate, even my Apple Watch now measures that, oxygen saturation and carbon dioxide levels, both continuously. Temperature, hydration status, and then finally glucose. Glucose has the question mark because it can measure glucose, not fine enough for making like insulin treatment decisions in patients who have diabetes, but can certainly help educate our patients about how certain dietary choices, so I say in the United States where pancakes for breakfast are common or sugary cereals, how that affects your glucose, how it spikes and then drops compared to eating something maybe healthier, granola or oatmeal in the morning, and how your glucose compares, and to kind of educate you on what the right food is for you and maybe why you feel so tired after a big meal at noontime. And so all of that, again, is not on one watch, but it's coming. And even beyond, I want to mention beyond just what our patients can use in terms of what digital medicine can bring, but what healthcare providers, not necessarily just physicians, but even just medically trained providers can have. So stethoscope is like the symbol of being a healthcare provider, and when I wear it around my neck, and it becomes almost like part of our fashion statement more than we use it. And part of that is when you look at studies, and this is a European study, and because I know, at least in my training, almost every doctor I worked with who trained in India was a gazillion times better at auscultation than we were. But so in a European setting, though, that included everybody from medical students to cardiologists, that their ability to identify a diastolic murmur, kind of an important thing to do, was as good as a coin flip. Right? So we've lost this art of being able to auscultate heart sounds, even though we still do it, and we still, maybe make decisions, and hopefully not unless that individual is much better than the general population is, and then often send somebody for an ultrasound. But really now there are 5 different devices that are really designed to have an ultrasound essentially in your pocket. And even though this is focused on physicians and cardiologists using this as part of your exam, it can really, a medical practitioner, a medical assistant trained just to do this could be out in rural communities doing obstetric ultrasounds, beaming that picture to anywhere in the world, to whatever OB you wanted to, anywhere in India, anywhere else can send those pictures. And really all you need, this is the GE device. This is a device by Sonosite. This is a device by Philips, which is really interesting because if you have an Android phone, all they really provide to you is the probe, and then you plug it into your own Android phone or Android tablet, and then you can, again, capture the ultrasound. You can look at it, and then you can send it anywhere you want for further evaluation. And then there's 2 different companies that make cordless ultrasounds. So ultrasounds, again, this is a Clarius device, and it connects to either an iOS or an Android phone, and it transmits the picture wirelessly to the phone and then captures it, and then you can send it anywhere. And these are all just first generations of pocket ultrasounds. I firmly believe that doctors in the future should be trained on just doing handheld ultrasounds. you can diagnose a whole lot more, and I think it'll be better. It's just going to be one of those things that's going to take some while to change. But beyond physicians using them, I think that this allows to bring ultrasound very easily out into the communities, out into remote areas, and it can be really life-saving technology. Beyond just the sensors, there's a ton of apps. In fact, there's in 2015, there were over 165,000 healthcare-related apps. I'd say most of them are not very good. In fact, only 36 of them, or overall 0.02% of the apps, accounted for 50% of all the downloads. So a very limited overall number of apps that people found useful, but maybe encouraging that at least 165,000 other developers really wanted to develop apps and felt like they had something that might be helpful, or at the very least would help make them money. The numbers with the apps keeping increasing, the number of downloads are increasing about 30% per year. And that can be good or bad, and we have to be careful. There is a lot of what we call snake oil in digital medicine, and a lot of people, the vast majority haven't gotten any regulatory approval, but they're just recognizing that there's a lot of solutions being developed. We just have to be careful in what we decide. Just because it's available as an app doesn't make it valid and useful. Wearable devices are also exploding and predicted to grow even further. So again, this is a 37% predicted growth out to 2021 of wearable sensor devices in the market, and that's just a sign of how many more are being developed, how many unique technologies are going to be available to use. And this is a recent article from The Economist that compared 2013 mobile health or wearable device associated revenues in 2013 to the forecast for 2018. And you can see just an explosion, almost a 20 times increase in this 5-year short period of time and globally around that. So there's a lot of promise and a lot of excitement about where these wearable sensors, as they get better, can do more and more, of how it's going to explode and really change healthcare. And I want you to realize that everything I've shown you is probably less than 0.1% of all the sensor technologies that are being developed. Again, some further along than others. This is just a figure from a review paper we wrote now 2 years ago, but what we wanted to highlight, and it still sticks today, is that pretty much any organ system, any disease state you can think of, some sensor technology has been developed around it. If it's known and it's clinically important, it's really impressive that some engineers somewhere at some university usually, or some startup, is developing or has developed a technology around that to help better understand the uniqueness of that individual who's wearing that sensor. So just keep in mind what's here today is still our very first generation of sensors. They're going to keep getting better. They're going to keep getting more and more choices, but you have to stay aware and plan accordingly. Now, the sensors are great, but I mentioned that's just one part of digital medicine. I want to focus on artificial intelligence just for this one slide and the capabilities that brings. So in particularly disruptive will be in anything in medicine today that involves image processing. So this is a paper that came out of the Google, or now Verily group, that used deep learning algorithms to detect diabetic retinopathy in retinal fundus photography that was actually better than ophthalmologists in diagnosing diabetic retinopathy in the training. And then this is a paper from now about 2 months ago that looked at, that used artificial intelligence techniques to do dermatological classification of lesions, and they compared it to a group of dermatologists from Stanford University and found they have equivalent diagnostic capabilities, so computerized artificial intelligence to diagnose dermatological lesions. And just recently, the FDA approved its first AI-supported mechanism for reading, in this case, MRI. There are other machine learning technologies that have been around for reading mammography and others, but that's going to keep getting better and better. So almost anything in healthcare right now that requires a physician or a trained individual to look at an image and make a diagnosis based on an image is very likely to be disrupted in the next several years. And that technology then can go right to the consumer. So as long as the consumer can take a picture of something with their smartphone or with maybe a device, or our device is being developed where somebody can take their own fundal picture, or at least a medical assistant can help go out to a village and do that. You can take that picture, send it anywhere, get a diagnosis right on the spot through using artificial intelligence. Now, I just want to kind of use an example. I'm going to turn to genomics in this idea of, well, what precision medicine can do using digital technology to refine the phenotype, genomic technology to refine the genotype. And so when I was in training in medical school and in residency, lung cancer kind of came in just a very limited variety. You called it either small cell, and if it was non-small cell, it was an adenocarcinoma, a large cell, or a squamous. In the late 1980s, then you broke it down. You would call it an adenocarcinoma, or they had a KRAS driver of it, and that was the first really genomic driver of cancer, and that could help determine therapies. But then over the years, we've refined more and more where it's becoming more and more common. We don't call cancers colon cancers, lung cancers, pancreatic cancers, or renal cancers, but more and more we're defining a cancer by what its genomic driver is. There's still a lot to learn on this, but there's enough anecdotal cases out there of people whose lives were saved by their cancer being genotyped, and instead of using frankly, what are poisons that have been studied in large populations to hopefully, and in some people helping improve survival in cancer, but instead have cured people by identifying the specific genetic mutation that's causing that cancer, and then a specific drug that treats that mutation. So cancer is a great example of how, with precision, diagnostics, whether it be through the phenotype or the genotype, in this case the genotype, we can much more precisely treat and better treat people. But you look at what's a huge problem in diabetes that's just exploding everywhere. I know it is in India, it certainly is in the United States and globally, but still in 2017, this is a treatment algorithm. So this treatment algorithm is just basically, no matter why you have diabetes, no matter who you are, this is type 2 diabetes, I should say, you follow this algorithm. And so really the only personalization is kind of a trial and error of what medication you respond to or don't respond to. We do that despite knowing there are thousands of unique risk markers, genetic risk markers for diabetes that we don't know yet exactly how that impacts not only your risk, maybe it should impact what your dietary choices are, and should certainly impact your therapy, but we don't know yet. And then with physiological monitors, in this case, a 24-hour glucose monitor, these are the charts of 7 different individuals who all have a hemoglobin A1C of 6. So everybody, we'd say in our normal treatment would say, all very good control of your diabetes. Your hemoglobin A1C is 6. But you can see there's really marked variation, that some individuals are really up and down and hyperglycemic and hypoglycemic, and others are within the range the entire time, but they're all treated right now the exact same way. So as we better understand genomic information, we better understand and are able to measure different physiological measurements, we're going to help refine our treatment and much more individualize it so we can identify the right medications for the right people at the right time. The other thing that these digital technologies are going to allow a completely different way of providing care. So going back to that idea that we've gotten away from house calls. Well, now, especially in the United States, and it sounds like through the success of Portea here in India also, people want more convenient care. They want care in their home if it's possible. In the US, there's this explosion in retail clinics. So our 2 large pharmacy chains are CVS and Walgreens, and you can see this great expansion in clinic volume there. There are other on-demand alternatives. There are several technologies where it's like Uber, but instead of calling a car to your house, you can call a doctor to your house and get a house visit from a physician. But really what's exploding the most is these virtual care platforms. So being able to talk to a physician or a healthcare provider, they're nurse-related physical therapist-related devices on your smartphone or on your tablet or on your computer. And again, this is the projected number of telehealth, and telehealth is used in a broad platform, but mainly focusing on this digital outreach capabilities up until 2018. And you can see it's really taking off exponentially. And that's why in the US, we have over 24 different virtual healthcare provider platforms being developed. All differ a little bit in what they do, but it's becoming a more and more crowded field with more and more opportunities, and people are slowly getting more and more comfortable with doing, seeing a physician or seeing a nurse on the other end of a phone, on a video phone call, rather than face-to-face. And that with continuing financial pressure to driving that's going to make a big difference. I think some of the most promising information supporting where this field is going and how important it is, you look at the biggest technology companies in the world, all of them have a very strong focus on healthcare. Apple, Microsoft, IBM Watson, Google, Samsung, many, many more. Qualcomm has Qualcomm Life. Apple, which we think of as, as the kind of the quintessential consumer-focused tech company. Tim Cook, their CEO, kind of said, when you look at most of the solutions, and he's talking mainly about the U.S. market in healthcare, they are done to get the reimbursement. So really, technology in healthcare is the only area where technology has increased the cost of care rather than decrease it. So what he says is not thinking about what helps the patient. So these technologies haven't been really focused on can we help the patient, but more, can we get more reimbursement? But he's saying if you don't care about the reimbursement, which we, Apple, have the privilege of doing, that may even make the smartphone market look small. So what he's saying is that Apple looks at the ability to provide consumer-focused health care as eclipsing the smartphone market, which has changed the world and financially obviously changed Apple. So sees a lot of promise in this and is putting a lot of resources in this. They're developing right now a personal health record plus an entire health-related ecosystem. So many, many more exciting things to come. And so when you kind of put all these together, I'm just going to use hypertension as an example. It's one of the biggest contributors to morbidity and mortality worldwide. If you're saying, okay, how do you do a system of care? Well, this is a picture of one of several watches that continuously measure blood pressure. So somebody's wearing the watch. It sends that information to your smartphone. On your smartphone, it already has your genomic information tied in. That can also include then and correlate your continuous blood pressure with your sleep, your diet, your activity, your stress level, your medications that you're taking. All of that can be analyzed and reviewed in an artificial intelligence platform, either Google, Watson, or a gazillion others. And then that information can get fed to an AI-supported virtual assistant or to a voice-assisted. This is the Amazon Echo, which has gotten a lot of development in healthcare, where you can interact by talking and finding out what's going on in your health. There's robotic assistants that become more and more human. And then, if you want to, you can have it go to a doctor and talk to a doctor. So it's all up to the patient. They can choose how they want feedback, but it's this whole system of care, in this example in hypertension. But really, you can think in any kind of chronic condition or any acute diagnostic, you can develop that systems of care. You have the sensors to do it. That information is all kind of sent to your phone, sent to that patient's dashboard. On that back end of that dashboard is a physician or provider dashboard that all of that status can be followed, and you can have something simple where it isn't like you have to look at every data point, but you can get support, clinical decision support around whether, this person just hasn't measured their blood pressure in a while. You should ping them and see what's going on, or somebody has measured their blood pressure or has recorded their lung sounds and there's wheezes. You should call them and connect with them and see what's going on. And all of that supported by a healthcare team as well as a computational team. And that's the kind of things that can really disrupt the way we provide healthcare today by really taking advantage of digital technology and forming this large ecosystem. mentioned very briefly this, that President Obama was spearheaded this precision medicine initiative. It's officially called the All of Us program. It involves 1 million people living in the United States, living everywhere of all diversities, and it's really designed to change what we understand about health and how we provide health care. And that was the vision. It isn't just your typical research study where we're just absorbing a lot of data from 1 million people, and that would be a lot of data. We're genotyping everybody, we're collecting their electronic health record data, we're using wearable sensors, we're collecting atmospheric data, survey data, and we're bringing all that together, and it's open science. Researchers in India, anywhere in the world are as welcome to look at the data sets. They have to register and make sure they have good clinical practice and in research, but is open to everybody to use and to find new scientific breakthroughs. Its mission is really to enable a new era of medicine through research, technology, and some policies that empower patients, researchers, and providers to work together towards development of individualized care. So this is just starting. It's designed to be a minimum of a 10-year project. It's really hoped it'll end up being a 40 or 50-year project where we follow people who start as teenagers joining the program and stay in it until they retire and even longer. And that'll allow us to really understand how genomics and environment and wearable sensors can not only inform us about how we better individualize care, but also inform us how do we communicate that information to the individual. Because this is really designed